Hello, and welcome back to the Authentic Creative Expanding Our Capacity to Feel Good. I just want you guys to know that this is going to be a very exciting moment because Chris Keener is a professional story man and a bit of a modern alchemist, mining the gold in people and in brands. He is a filmmaker, a creative director, and breathwork guide. As the former creative director at Mudwater, which is how I knew of him, and then I met him in a cafe in LA the last time I was there, at Juicy Ladies in particular. I was with my dad and I recognized him and I was like, I know this guy. Oh, he's the Mudwater Breathwork guy. So we were chatting and he said, we're gonna do a breathwork class in Santa Monica tonight. And I was like, yep. And I asked him if I could interview him, and he was like, yep. So here we are. So the coffee alternative is what Mudwater is, that has become a phenomenon, and I've been drinking it for a while. Chris helped redefine what a brand voice can be. Under his creative helm, Mudwater became a movement advocating for mental health, psychedelics, and rebooting the morning routine, right? So there's mushrooms in Mudwater, but I'm curious when it says psychedelics, if there's any more to that story or not, or if they just mean the regular mushrooms that are in the Mudwater. But I do remember watching a breathwork YouTube video of him, one or two breathwork YouTube videos when I had gotten back into breathwork again a few years ago. And he did a whole facilitation on YouTube that I watched that was brilliant. And I remember sharing that with my breathwork teacher and saying, this is really interesting. So before that, before the whole Mudwater thing, Chris globetrotted with cameras in hand, directing and producing for heavyweights like Netflix, National Geographic, Discovery, and PBS. He made docu-series like We Speak Dance and Conflict that took on global stories with heart and grit. So Chris is also the founder of Goldenair Breathwork. I actually went to that breathwork class, as I was saying, in Santa Monica at the Mudwater Gather facilities, which is so gorgeous and amazing. And there's like outside, there's a cold plunge, and I think there's a sauna out there out on the outside, and then they serve Mudwater at the desk, main desk, which is so lovely. Afterwards, everyone was drinking Mudwater and having like muffins, and the breathwork class was just beautiful. And he helps people breathe their way into clarity, joy, and transformation. From boardrooms to prisons, he leads powerful breathwork journeys that strip away the noise and leave people wondering why no one told them about this sooner. I know that's how I felt when I started doing breathwork for the first time, like over 20 years ago or something. And then again, fell in love with it again a few years ago, just over 3 years ago, maybe it's 3.5 years ago, I want to say. So I'm really excited to talk to him about being a visionary, being a creative, being a breathwork facilitator, all of the different ways that he serves in the world with all of his creative gifts. So here's Chris. I was sharing that I met you first through watching you on YouTube and through knowing about Mudwater and drinking Mudwater was my first introduction to you, and then meeting you at Juicy Ladies in LA, and then just that very night going to your breathwork class, which was
Yeah, it was
wonderful. Yeah.
a nice fast introduction we had. We were fast friends. We went through you went through basically my whole background in one day. So it's cool.
And what I liked after I took your breathwork class is you were sharing with me a little bit about a vision that you had for playing some film on the ceiling during a breathwork class, how you want to incorporate more movement into your breathwork classes. So that's when I realized, oh, okay, you're like a filmmaker, you're a visionary, you're a creative, not just a breathwork facilitator, not just someone who was an ambassador for Mudwater, but like you have all these different ways that you're creative. And of course, I watch your Instagram and you're like in nature and you're traveling. So you're very dynamic and multifaceted, and I'm just curious because this is the authentic creative, and creatives are listening to this. So here's your first question. You have traveled the world capturing powerful stories on film, and now you're guiding people inward through breath work. I think those probably have overlapped a little bit if I had to guess, but I don't know. What is the common thread for you? And maybe you're just discovering this every day new between storytelling and the breath.
Oh, cool. Well, I would say first and foremost, like I think creativity is like an inflection or a mindset or an approach or a way of seeing everything. And in my life, it's been this desire to like turn things over. It's just to like turn things over and see what's under there, or see what's inside, or push out a little bit further into the unknown. And I think the breath work that I guide and the breath work that I'm most drawn to has a very, this is going to sound haughty, but a real cinematic quality to it,
Mm-hmm.
because I guide visualizations as part of
Yep.
the work, and so that can be a really creative endeavor where you can kind of explore these landscapes and these inner landscapes, but you can also give dimension to them. So as a guide, I can say, you find yourself in a clearing and there's, tall trees all around you, or you're on the edge of a bluff overlooking, the great beyond. And you can invoke these real creative cinematic images. And because you're in state with breath work, you can really get people to a place where that's very tangible, or they can experience that in ways that in the waking world we don't quite have access to that level of visualization. And so I think directly that's what's kind of cinematic, and that's what my film background directly relates to breath work in that way. But I'd say that that sort of creative inflection, which is just like turning stuff over to see what's under there and see what more there is to life, and what how deep this thing goes. Like that's how deep does this well go? That's kind of like the what brought me into breath work, and going down that path has uncovered like great creative insights too. I mean, that's the other piece, is that
Yeah, you probably get a lot of ideas for film and creativity while you're breathing or facilitating.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool that this I think also the methodology of breathwork that I love most creates something of a flow state, like something of
Mhm.
a place where you can actually go to very specific, you can ask very specific questions, and you can get insight about how to navigate your life in a very pragmatic way. Not just kind of like, big spiritual answers, but sometimes it's like, do your taxes, dude. That's the thing you've been avoiding. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
so those kind of things come up often.
Yes, it can be very practical and pragmatic. It doesn't always have to be dreamlike and visionary when you're having a breathwork session. I'm just curious about so many things. My head's like in all these places because I want to ask you a million things. But let me just ask you, meditation versus breathwork. What is that for you? How do you relate to that? Do you see breathwork as a type of meditation? Do you also just do guided meditation? Is breathwork really to you a more powerful way into our answers and into our highest potential?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I usually use breath work is as an on-ramp to meditation. So it's
Okay.
in a way, it's the breath work is kind of the doing of mindfulness. It's an active way to get your body in state, so that the idea of meditation becomes much more palatable for someone with a very active, busy mind. I think for some of us, it's a very it's a very stoic pursuit to sit down and kind of let your thoughts kind of start to quietly settle, particularly for a lot of us who have, yeah, active minds, busy lives. And that's not to say that that's not worth doing. It's a very worthwhile pursuit. And I find that a great way of getting your body in state to settle your mind, to settle your thoughts, is by doing active breath work, active breathing. So it's something um, you can invoke, with work, with effort, with direct action.
Mm-hmm.
when I first found breath work, meditation, I was kind of in a tough spot in my heart and head, very tough spot. I was
Okay.
depressed. I was all over the place. And the idea of sitting quietly with my thoughts was terrifying. And it was exactly where I didn't want to be, was
Mm-hmm.
quietly meditating. And, there's two ways you could look at that. One is, well, you need to meditate more and shame on you. You should just sit there until it works.
Mm-hmm.
And breath work was this other way of approaching it, which is just like, well, let's be with that. Let's be with the torment of your mind, and let's even fan the flames a little bit.
Yeah,
So
like activate it
breath,
more, bring it more.
activate it even more. Like if
Yeah.
that's what your brain wants to do, give it to it, and give into it, and breathe deeper, fuller, and light that fire and stoke it until you're so stormy that then you sort of get lost, and then everything starts to settle, because the eye of the hurricane is the calmest place in the world, right? So
Mm.
that's that's kind of what it feels like for me, and applying that to daily life and daily practice is, I'll do just a few rounds of breath work of some kind, just to kind of get me in state, and acknowledge that my body's here, and acknowledge that there's frayed edges that maybe need to be calmed a little bit before I'm ready to sit quietly and meditate. And so that's kind of how I see it. Certainly, there are formats of breath work that work really well, as a meditation, where you're kind of just slowing the breath or doing very gentle
Mm-hmm.
pranayama or breath work, that I'll continue through meditation. But I guess another thing that is common is that you might relinquish control of the breath during meditation, so that you're actually noticing the breath more so than trying to control it or actively doing anything with it. So I really, really like that interplay of actively controlling the breath and then allowing the breath to breathe you, which is very passive and very, um, and that's the beautiful switch that we have. Breath is this one part of our automatic nervous system that we can either actively control or relinquish control of. And so when you play with that switch, you're playing with all kinds of things. One of them is trust. Do I trust my body? Here I am actively breathing, and then you watch, give over control of your breath. Watch your breath just take care of you. Feel your body take care of you. Feel that you are taken care of in the most fundamental way by this apparatus you showed up on this earth with, and it is taking care of you. You're being taken care of. So that alone is really good. It's a really good
Mm.
valve to play with, control versus surrender, and it happens over and over again.
I want to ask you about, you mentioned depression. I struggle with anxiety. Have you struggled with anxiety, or is that your clients mostly, the students that come to you? And because, first thing you wake up in the morning, I notice, oh, my breath is shallow. My breath is maybe quick because
mm,
immediately the mind starts racing. And so I find that breath work gives me that ability to create expansiveness and step out of fear.
mm.
And I'm curious what that is for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was really powerful framing, just to think that depression is when you're in your past and anxiety is when you're in your future, and the present is sort of the solution to both of those, or at least the
Mm-hmm.
respite from both of those. And so I can absolutely relate. I think a lot of people who have depression also suffer with anxiety. It's really, they're both symptoms of not being, rooted in right now.
Yeah.
Um, no judgment. That's what we do. And another kind of quote that comes to mind is that worrying is praying for, the future we don't want. And
Mm.
I think about that a lot with regards to anxiety. Is I often will catch myself sort of praying for this unwanted future, and um, and breath, for both of those, for both the past depression, the future anxiety. Breath is the bringing back to center, right? Bringing back to
Hmm.
moment, because you can't breathe in the future, you can't breathe in the past. You're breathing now. You're breathing this
Hmm.
breath. So if you're really truly being with this breath, you are by definition being present. And I know of no other way to get so present, because it is kind of it's the heart
Yeah.
beating.
And
Yeah.
invoking the senses too. I think that you work with the senses as well.
Mm.
Imagine you like smelling something or feel like I at the beginning of a breathwork class I'll talk about like what's your favorite smell or what's your favorite sound, what's your favorite you used to be an actor back in the day, right?
Yeah, I still do. I still do some acting. It's funny you found my 15 minutes of fame on in Mudwater. When you're in ads, they get seen so many times. I've been in movies, all kinds of stuff, and the things that I've probably been seen the most are these ads for
For
things.
mud,
So
yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
burn your 15 minutes of fame on ads, but yeah, and acting is very much about that. It's very much about presence. I think that's what in fact, the first breathwork guide I had was my acting teacher, Karen Austin, incredible acting teacher, incredible actor. And she would guide us in breathwork at the beginning of every class,
Nice.
get us present. And then we would kind of come back from her meditation and notice colors in the room and notice, the smell of the air and exactly what you're talking about, sensory grounding in right now as a way of being in scene, in the scene of life. Like, if you and I are on stage, I better be paying attention to you
Yeah.
and listening to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so being authentic, because I'm jumping all around here, but this is the authentic creative. Being authentic to me is like what you're talking about. It's being in the moment, noticing the other person, noticing what's happening, reading the room, like getting in your body, all of that.
Mm.
You're an authentic, visionary, creative. You help other businesses. Like, so how do you be your full authentic self and be a leader and kind of like not care how you're showing like how you're being perceived because in order to be authentic you really have to slough off that kind of hypervigilance of not of like people pleasing and
Self, I think.
right.
I think, uh, yeah, it's a great question. Because I think it's the question of life. Because I think the motto of life, or the closest thing I have to like a guiding life principle, is learn who you are and become it. Is the idea that that's all we're here to do. It's just kind of learn who it is that I am in every moment and become it, and
Mhm.
then learn again because it evolves, and become it, and then learn again and become it. And I think
Can I
kind of
pause you because I want to understand you
yeah,
when you say learn who you are and become it? Would that be an example like I am the possibility of unconditional love and then become that? Or give what would be your example?
sure, that feels abstract to me and
Okay.
challenging. But for me,
Okay.
it's like I seem to like pottery,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm gonna follow that lead. And so truly, like, what is it that ignites me, that lights me up? What am I noticing in the world? What am I when I'm here, how do I feel about that person in the room? What is my bodily reaction to that person, to this conversation? It's just all like, it's a self-inquiry. I mean, it's this stuff is coming out of us. We don't know where our personality, our being comes from, but we show up with this face, and this is my face. This is all I got. I don't know. I showed up with this. I didn't maybe I chose it, but not consciously in this go around. And so, you kind of just like, wow, that was interesting, the way that I, showed up for that conversation. I felt good doing this. I'm going to do that more. I felt good
Mm-hmm.
doing guiding breath work. I'm going to do that more. And
Mm-hmm.
also, within that, within authenticity, I think the paradox is lest you get too self-involved. I think you learn who you are by taking it off the room. I think you see what you get back. And this is not like I'm people pleasing, whatever. People pleasing is not such a bad thing, first of all. Like, it'd be nice to help people out in their lives because life is hard, and give the gift of, mirth to the people around you. But also, like, um, this goes back to acting, like, just to kind of stay with the acting metaphor for a
Mm-hmm.
minute. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you getting off this other person in the scene? Are you getting what you want or not? Or do you have to try a different tactic or not? And good actors, all you're doing is reacting. So all
Mm-hmm.
you're doing, and what that does, and the amazing thing about that, and the spiritual act of that, is it gets you out of yourself because
Mm-hmm.
you're paying attention to them,
Mm-hmm.
and you are becoming you in a way just by like taking it off the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, so it's this cool, it's like externally focused in that you are kind of really listening, like truly listening to the world, and it's drawing you out in ways that the world wants from you, and you're just trying not to get in the way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're just becoming it. You're
Mm-hmm.
learning who you are, you're listening, you're being very sensitive to, like, what am I getting back, what feels good in here. Yes, but don't get like, and then become it, and then go do it and see what you get back. So that there's both, like, the internal process, learn who you are, and the external process of becoming, and becoming again and again. And so what happens when, I'm curious to you about when you guide things. My guess is there's something about becoming, guiding, that feels reinforcing, that feels good, that feels like you're being
Mm-hmm.
helpful, that
Mm-hmm.
feels like the world is like, yes, more of that. Awesome. you know and that's what I got back.
Mm-hmm.
And so that drawed me into becoming a guide. And it was very, I didn't have to push, I was pulled. you know um do you feel that
Yeah,
way?
like that Rumi quote, yeah, just be silently drawn to it. Yeah, I mean, yes, very much what you said about what lights you up, listening to, where you're being drawn to and what feels good. I'm kind of paraphrasing what you said, but yes, I mean, if I was going to do something logical that was inauthentic, I would maybe be better off in certain ways. But my soul would be dying. So, yeah, what lights up my soul is definitely where I just let myself be led. And I feel lucky that I've had the ability and the support to let myself be led where my passions are, to let myself just be led by my soul and led by what my body likes. But yeah, just in terms of authenticity, I think what you're saying is just listening and just showing up to where you're feeling that there's good information. Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I'm drawn. I'm brought back to this. Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic. That
Mm-hmm.
book talks
Mm-hmm.
about, authenticity vis-a-vis originality, right? And that authentic is always more helpful. And as she gets older, she talks about being more drawn to authenticity than originality. And that's kind of something that, as a creative person, that I think about often. In fact, I just did this on a project where it was like
Mm-hmm.
I felt pulled by the client to go towards something original. One of the clients, it was like the
Was it
CEO.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just like one person in the group felt like they were pulling us towards, like, I want to do something original, I want to do something nobody's ever seen, kind of mindset. And I started doing that, and then I realized I lost my footing because I was like, I don't know where that is. Like, sometimes you get the bolt of lightning and you do something truly original and you become Prince and whatever, but that's pretty rare, right?
Yeah.
And the true way to get there anyway is to be authentic,
Yeah.
like, because truly authentic ends up kind of being original often. But even if it doesn't, it's like rooting in authenticity, which is just like, this is how this, I want to say something true here, I want to say something that feels good to me, I want to say something that, like, I believe when I watch it lights up my heart, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's truth in it. And
Mm-hmm.
that, to me, is kind of a guiding principle over trying to grasp for originality.
Yeah, it's
And
like, how do I be different is just kind of dictating yourself by what everyone else is doing.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
and the truth is, there's 8 billion people in the world, so good luck being original anyway.
Yeah.
It's
And there's
it's
only like
tough.
7 stories out there, and Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so being creative and expanding our capacity to, because you're so dynamic and you've done so many things in your life, how do you kind of discern like where your creativity is going to flow on any given day? Because I know like one day I saw on your Instagram, you were like, I'm supposed to be at work and I'll probably get fired for, or like canceled or fired for this or whatever you were saying, but I'm going into the woods and I'm going to hike and I'm going to like go naked into this pool of water. Like, how are you making these decisions as this authentic creative person?
This, yeah, I like that you chose that video because that video is another life motto I have, which is how's Tuesday? Point being like if anything, you should arrange your life so that you can do on a Tuesday the most compelling, exciting things to you should be available to you on a Tuesday. I mean, that's kind of how I've chosen. Like, I never wanted to, because to be truthful, like, I don't know that there's ever been a job I would get fired from for le leading off on a Tuesday and going into the woods. And if there was, I probably would stop working there.
Hmm.
Um, because it's so important to me to have that ability to do the thing that is that lights me up on a Tuesday. I'm so privileged for being able to even say that. I realize that, and it's been really important to me, and I've made sacrifices. I've
Mm-hmm.
made sacrifices in not having a 9 to 5 that I had a building huge 401k over the years, and God
Yeah.
knows I've made certain sacrifices.
Like your freedom has been the priority.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And um, so how's Tuesday? So like if you can ask that question, it's like, yeah, how's Tuesday for, going up to the hot springs in Ohio? Or how, that's one of my guiding, things. Um, and beyond that, because I know a lot of people can't, get lost on Tuesday. That's fine. It's more of a way of orienting your life so that creativity comes from the things that juice you and fill you
Hmm.
up. That
Hmm.
what I've found as I get older, it used to be eh, like more active, physical stuff like uh, team sports or surfing or stuff like that.
Hmm.
Now I find just walking forever is like miles and miles and miles is really where if I need to solve a problem, I must go walk.
Mm.
Not like tangential to me doing the thing. It is the way that I figure out creative problems.
Hmm.
And I can't believe we don't talk about this more because, I think there's so many luminaries, Einstein figured everything out when he went on walks, and I think it's good enough for him. It's
Oh,
good enough
interesting.
for us to, yeah. So walking, just that bilateral stimulation, that it's
Yeah.
very good for your brain. I think in a lot of ways, analog to breath work, it's a repetitive, simple.
Well, it forces you to do breath work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Most things do. Dancing does, singing does. A
Yeah.
lot.
It sounds like you have to be embodied
Yeah.
in order to make your decision. So, but like, just curious to come back to that decision making process. Did you do a little mini breathwork session and then go, okay, I'm gonna go and skinny dip today? Like, how are you making those decisions? Is it literally coming from your heart, your body? Is it through what, how is it through?
I mean, I get itchy. My body just gets itchy to move
Like,
every day.
I gotta get out and
I gotta
into the,
move. And I
yeah.
think when we don't listen to that, I mean, that's your number one signal. If your body wants to move, go move. Because that's everything else lives in there, right? If and one way to incite movement is to start with breath work. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean, first thing in the morning, I'll do some breath work and do a little meditation, and then probably go move. If not, I'll move later in the day. Or
Nice.
but that's the high. I mean, that's the hierarchy for sure. And if not, just get out of bed and start moving right away because you're going to breathe anyway. That'll be, the breath work will come if you go and work out or whatever.
Sometimes I was like, so this morning I gave myself a breathwork session and I was laying there breathing and crying and I was thinking like, am I just doing like lazy yoga? Like,
Yeah, totally.
like, I mean, I just questioned, like, did you get into yoga first? And do you, like, because I know you were talking about incorporating movement into your breathwork classes.
Yeah,
What do you think about that? I mean, go where you want to go with that.
I did. I mean, I did get into yoga first. And I went very deep into yoga for many, many years. I'm less into it now, just because I'm trying to do more like weightlifting and more
Hmm.
yeah, just to build muscles. I'm 45, so I just want to make sure that I'm doing less lengthening and more strengthening.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the movement aspect of like, I think especially for like a young body, like wanting to move, wanting to, anything that gets you moving is good for you.
But
That's like the simplest thing you could ever say, and it's true. It's just like
yeah.
moving is good.
Usually in yoga class. So I think what the difference is, like, is, yeah, okay, sometimes when I got really into yoga, of course, sometimes occasionally I would cry, but like for me, breathwork is very emotive. I don't know if it's that way for you, but it's like very cathartic. So to me, that's a little bit of the difference is like I am wringing out the emotions.
Yeah.
So then I can just like be more of a clear channel and serve.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. For me too, certain kinds of breath work in particular are more emotive, and I'm kind of dense. So to draw emotion out of me, to draw tears out of me, to draw laughter, sometimes requires a little more. And
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm.
fact, it's been a long time since I sort of cried. And the other night I just went for a walk, and it was actually that. And then I started running, and it was actually like the hard physical motion that allowed that to sort of come. um, but yeah, I hear you. I mean, and that, I think, honestly, for some people, it's not always helpful to go to a place of like deep emotionality all the time. And because it's available to you, I think, like everything else, there's balance. And these formats of breath work, you can really go to, like, you can go mine the emotional, in a pretty big way. I think for most people, it's good to err on the side of like feeling your emotions, for sure. And for some people, I think you can get lost there. And
Yeah, 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 for
you
sure.
know, what's your relationship to that?
I've worked with a breathwork facilitator privately one-on-one where so certain training I had was like very leaning towards the emotion using music to like bring out the emotion,
Mm,
lyrical, emotive music, which I love to do when I facilitate. But I've worked with this other facilitator who like he'll be like, okay, cry for a second, but like let's go. And
mm,
he's very like he's a professional dancer, like very physical. So
mm.
he's like he really has gotten me into the discipline of the breath. Like
Yeah.
really just keep on it. And so the whole time your class that I went to, I was like, oh, this is very physical, very disciplined. And I was finding myself wanting to just like cry the whole time. But yeah, definitely when I stay disciplined, and I don't go into some, I had one person say once, is this just emotional masturbation?
Mm,
Because yeah, I think you can get lost in
mm.
the fact that it can kick up emotion for you and be like, oh yeah, I'm in the emotion. But
And
but it,
doing
yeah. What were you gonna say?
I think that's great, and it's cool to hear that reflection from you, that my class feels very physical, because in some ways, I've trained in, XPT, performance breath work, where and with, Brian McKenzie and Laird Hamilton, all these guys that do like performance based breath work,
Hmm.
CO2 tolerance training, and nasal breathing.
I
And
have a friend who does that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's awesome, and I love that stuff. And for free diving, and running rocks underneath the bottom of a pool, and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And amazing for physical training, amazing for health, and all biomarkers and all that stuff. And um, I also trained in very, very emotional, breath work, this 3-part breath, and this, holotropic kind of tradition where it's very emotive and very, spiritually leaning,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to think that I live somewhere in the middle, or that's sort of where I'm most comfortable, is borrowing from both and finding the integration of the two. And I think for some people it's probably too emotional, and for some people it's too physical, and for some
Mm,
people
mm.
it's just right, and that's great. So, and there's, to each their own, I think.
Well, I'd say to people, there's so many flavors of facilitation. Try all of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because what I don't like is when someone tries one thing and they go, "Oh, that's breath work. I don't like that." And I'm like,
It's
"No,
so
no, no,
funny.
try everything."
I think there's a great, very kind of glaring example of that, in that a lot of people have read the book Breath by James Nestor.
Yes.
Awesome book. I
Yeah.
love James. He's a friend. It's an incredible book,
Oh, wow.
um, and his example of holotropic breathwork in that book was a very kind of, edge
Scientific.
leaning experience where there's people, going around barking like dogs and all this stuff. And that is an edge case experience. That is an experience that is doable in breathwork, that's available. And for some people, that's just like, unfortunately, that's kind of the represented a whole world in that book, like
Hmm.
what I would call the whole world of the like spiritual emotional breath work was represented by one very much an edge case. And the rest of
Uh-huh.
that was kind of devoted to the more physiological breath work. And thank God, because that book blew everybody's mind open about the possibilities of breath. So very valuable book in that way, and also missed like
I just remember it being very
the world.
technical and historical, and like this is the way the
Yeah.
jaw works, and this is the science of yeah. And then Wim Hof, I was like, oh my gosh, so inspirational. Like, and I love how he was like, just get the breath in, just get it in. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about how you're doing it. And I
Yeah.
love that simplicity of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what were you gonna say?
Just, I think I like, my favorite thing is kind of introducing people to the emotionality of breathwork and to the access that it provides. And the the way into that idea, it's really simple. It's like, think about every ecstatic expression that humanity has had over the course of, it's fans at a football stadium, it's people dancing around a fire, it's the beating of drums, it's the sexuality of a lead singer. All of these things are rooted in breath. They're
Mhm.
all like necessarily the thing that is the most instrumental, like literally the instrument is the breath.
Mhm.
And so it's no coincidence that emotionality lives in the way that you're breathing, and that can invoke the whole human experience is possible in the channel of breathing. And you can be a jock with your breath, you can be a lead singer with your breath, you can be, there's so many ways to invoke the breath to to reverse engineer a human experience, which is,
Mhm.
I mean, that's the holotropic tradition came from that. As Stan Groff saying, like, can we invoke the psychedelic, or this ecstatic experience by just, studied the breath. He studied the breath of people that were going through these big psychedelic experiences and learned that there was this commonality to the breath, and it was connected and it was deep, and then said, okay, what if we just do that? And then all of a sudden you see that just that creates the experience. So there's, what happens if you breathe like you were breathing at a football game, like it'd be really fun to track people's breath as they're going about doing these different experiences, and just see, like, you know or as you're singing, ole 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 ole, you're vibrating your vocal cords, you're
Mm.
releasing nitric oxide in your blood, you're getting your feel good chemicals all through your body. There's a communal experience, you're showing the back of your throat so that you're vulnerable to the people around you. That is a, you know ecstatic human experience 101. It's collective, it's shared, and the breath is invoked, and the humming in the body, the cavity of the body vibrating. It's awesome. It's awesome to think that it's all available there, and it's like, it's so funny that we've forgotten that, or that's that there's even a question
I
that
know.
you
Yeah.
could, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because trauma, like, is so much a part of what we do as breathwork facilitators is to address trauma. And people hearing the word trauma just go kind of, want to back up from that word.
Mm,
And but it's just stuck or stored stuff that hasn't been processed,
mm,
right? So I would love to have a way to talk about it with people that it doesn't feel confronting because I think, people would go to a sports game or they'll go sing or they'll go chant or do whatever, but the last thing people want to do is feel
mm,
something,
mm.
is deal with trauma. Like I will do anything but do that, right?
And
It's
they'll
just
go, yeah.
a lot of people. I mean, maybe not in your experience. I don't know.
Well, I just think we go about it in roundabout ways that where we don't, that this, I guess that's what I'm getting at, which is like, look at a football stadium in Leeds in England or whatever, and how many of those people that are religious about football, you know, I would guess there's some percentage of them that had really shitty fathers and they got beat up
Hmm.
as kids, and they're
Hmm.
trying to release that trauma and they're doing it collectively with the masculine energy all around, and like that. That's how we will find ways to go about it, and we do creative
Mm,
ways to go about the collective release of trauma. And I think that's why people get so addicted to things like sports, and
mm.
it's good. I mean, it's been that way forever, that we would have ways of releasing trauma that were uh,
Yeah, I like to say like before a primal sounding, because I do primal sounding, I like to say like imagine this is your sports game.
hmm.
And
Yeah.
like you're not gonna ask permission if you can hoop and holler at a sports game. You're just gonna go for it. Yeah.
When you do that, when you kind of elicit people to make loud sounds like that, how, do you notice that there's, like, what's the progression? Do people usually start with some, I'm sure everybody's different, but like if somebody presents with resistance, how do you draw them out? How do you draw them into that? What are some other ways?
I try I say in the beginning, the top of the class, this is what we're gonna do, and this is why we're gonna do it, and this is the permission I'm gonna give you.
Mm,
Then I build up to it. And then when we get there, I'm really turned into like a hard ass coach. Like, come on, like you
Real
got
sergeant.
like really like don't save it for later. Like I really kind of drive it home,
Yeah.
because I find that people are so scared. Some people are so scared to get angry, to
Mm,
drop into their rage.
mm,
And it's anger is such an incredible tool
mm,
to like if you fully feel your anger and fully vibrate that anger out of your body, just
mm.
you're gonna sleep better. You're not gonna have road rage in traffic.
Yeah. Kiana, my partner Kiana and I were talking about this last night. We watched Dave Chappelle on
Uh-huh.
SNL. Have you
Uh-huh.
seen this yet?
Oh
Un-
yeah.
Unbelievable monologue that he gave. Just so, and what we were talking about is he is someone who has deep anger in his, like,
Mm,
he has lots of reasons to be angry, and he has gone to hell and back, like,
mm.
5 years ago, and when he dropped off the face of the earth 10 years
You
ago.
went like to Africa or something and he
Totally.
like
And
totally
he,
yeah.
show canceled, and turned down 40 million bucks or whatever it was. And
Right.
then came back and noticed that his stand up, like, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, was like angry, and there's like deep anger in it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this quality in this most recent SNL dispatch, that
Mm-hmm.
was this transmuted anger. Like the anger is still there. He
Mm-hmm.
still has access to it,
Mm-hmm.
and he's able to deliver this unbelievable, funny, insightful, like edgy truth with the anger to fuel it,
Mm.
but without it. He's like harnessing it, like he's got two big, like, dragons by the chains, and he is the master of it. Like he's still holding this the availability for it without it taking him over. And I think that's like that's what our wisest, elders have in common. That's what the shamans have in common, is like they've been through it. They have they've lost their tempers, they've screwed up, they fucked up, they've felt all of that. And then in catharsis, in the in his current form, what I see is somebody who's really been able to incorporate all of that and to embody all of that into this mouthpiece that is so direct, with so much compassion, so much anger, so
Mm,
much humanity, all in the same thing. I mean, that monologue, when I saw that, that's a masterclass in communication.
love it. I want to watch that right
It's
away.
all
Yeah.
there. Every note is there. And I thought that was just like, yeah, made my
Yeah,
goose.
channeling it, using that fire and that passion, and then giving it structure and using all of his preparation and his art and his craft to channel it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's like
So,
we have this. Yeah.
we're talking about arts and we've been talking about breathwork this whole time, but do you want to share anything about your arts and, directing and creating, like anything else about that that you're lit up about?
I mean, what I'm most lit up about, and I think this is kind of, you know, I forget who who I learned this from, but just the idea of just nexuses of strengths, and where you have different, um
Like zones of genius?
yeah, just like where they intersect is where you have kind of the
Oh,
most
like an
leverage.
ikigai kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And where
Mm-hmm.
you have the most leverage is where those things intersect. And so for me, breathwork guide, you know, creative filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's kind of my, what do you call it, unfair advantage, to use a business term, but like where those two things intersect. And then I would even add a third, which is this like humor or something, like humorous breathwork guide filmmaker, that I have access to all those three, is like that's the ikigai, that's the point of leverage for me. And I think that's where I'm most excited to do more.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I think that's kind of, it's also funny because, if I'll call myself out a bit, I've been, when in the pursuit to make money, I have ways that I can make money that are not that, right? Like I can forego breathwork guide and just be a creative, you know, and make my living that way, and
Mm-hmm.
often do, mostly do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm challenged to stick with that, and to really like begin to put down those things that aren't that, in order to see where that can go. And that's kind of my next excitement, is like I've done like breathwork videos, and I get creative on Instagram and stuff like that, but I don't do it with the same fervor and the same time and effort and intensity that I put into client work sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
because client work pays the bills, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's my Monday through Friday or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
excepting occasional Tuesdays. And so it's really like that idea of paying yourself, and I'm excited about that now, and so I'm giving myself the permission to really do more in that lane. Yeah.
Nice.
Creating breathwork
Yeah.
content that's
So
really
what so what would the dream be of those things, your humor and breathwork and filmmaking? Like what would one of the dreams be? Do you dare speak it?
well,
What would it be?
if you haven't learned by now, I speak in aphorisms, and one of the if I point forward at my epitaph, which is a fun exercise to do, like what do you want written on your grave, it's some version of like, he welcomed people to the dance of life, like it. And my life motto is like, you're welcome to dance, right? Like I
I
just
love
love
that.
the idea of welcoming people into um the the joy, the mess, the ecstasy, the experience of life, like to fully be in the suit. And I think I'm good at that. And so
Mhm.
what I'm most excited about is, in the breathwork content, is speaking to people who might not otherwise find it, and bringing them into a truly like ecstatic, psychedelic, like wondrous, wonderful experience of themselves through the breathwork.
Yeah.
And and also providing relief but I think that there are guides and there are somatic practitioners and there are people who
Hmm.
are very good at pinpointing something like trauma. Like I work with people with trauma one-on-one who that's not my zone of genius. I'm
Hmm.
so glad there's people who do that. That feels
Hmm.
so incredible to
Important.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I'm like easily comfortable is in a room of 5,000 people and people who've never heard of breath work and inviting them into this experience that knocks their socks off. And that's what I want to do.
Okay. I really want to ask about that, and I know we should probably wrap up soon, but how and I was sort of touching on this earlier when I was like, oh, how do you be authentic and not care about what other people think? That kind of thing, that kind of question. How do you have the capacity? How do you do that? How do you be the type of person that leads 5,000 people, some of which, a lot of which haven't done breathwork before? How do you be that person? Do you know, or is it just intrinsic to you?
I mean, I think you start with you can't teach beyond your own experience. So you start by breathing yourself. You start by being in practice. Um, and there in that instance, there's just that kind of being called forth thing. It sounds a little whimsical to talk about, but like when you are in service and you give yourself to that, you're gone. Like you're so called into it. And if you're a full body yes to that, um, one of the trainings I've had is being an actor, being on stage, getting comfortable. Like I did a video called about peeing on your stage, which is a funny way of putting it, but which is just like when you have, I'll tell you very practically, when I'm go out to a big room full of people, the first thing I do is go get there early and go out in the space where I'm going to be guiding and sitting and make sure I sit there and hold the room and like plant myself and ground and kind of
Hmm.
own this space and say like
Hmm.
this is my it's almost like your vocation, it's your dharma, this is my spot, this is what I'm going to be helpful. Now everything else, like pull it out of me kind of thing, like make me an instrument, that whole thing. And to assume you're anything less is you're in your head too much. Like you
Yeah.
let yourself be that, let yourself be useful, let yourself, may I be helpful,
Yeah,
may I
you're
be.
like step out of ego, get into soul, like
Yeah.
just serve
And
and
you got to be willing to say silly things and to mess up and to like, and I do, like and oftentimes you end up saying things that surprise you and you're like, I don't know where that came from. Must be
yeah.
hopefully helpful.
Yeah.
So
Did you start with smaller groups and then eventually, I mean, I'm imagining you started small and then you just kept expanding your ability to pee all over the floor, pee all over the stage.
you start drinking more water as you get more
Yeah.
into it. Yeah, I did. I started very small. I started in my living room, a couple of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. How
And
about
do you
you?
still get the same amount of joy from those first moments of facilitating? Does it still feel just as ecstatic for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I really love it. Love it. And I love it most when there's, you know, at least, five people in the room. Like I love I like groups. I like to do
Yeah,
group.
and I've seen you facilitate outside.
Hmm.
Is that challenging or is that the best way to do it? Do you just love being outside facilitating because there's kind of distraction and
It's physically challenging and it's distracting and the container gets diffused and it's leaky and
yeah,
all
yeah,
that stuff. So you just have to come with bigger, like come with more energy, come with um more, I guess, surrender to like the fact, so there's a dog barking over there or something, and you include it, you
yeah,
know
yeah,
include. This is also improv 101, right? If like a light falls and you pretend like that didn't happen, everyone's going to be thinking about the light for the rest of the
right.
experience. So you say, like, you bring in the light, you talk about the crash that everyone just heard, and then you keep going.
Yeah,
And so that's a big part of it too. I think that's actually a pretty good takeaway for young facilitators is like it's never going to be perfect, and so you include whatever's happening, and you beget trust by doing that,
Mm.
because then that's a true common shared experience, because you're present. You're saying in the present that just happened, and if I act like that didn't happen, I'm in my like my
You're
plan.
just disassociating. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
plan about what I wanted this to be, or the perfect version of this, and I'm not in the reality of the room and what just happened. And so I think and that's the
And
fun of
and that's the humor that you probably bring to it too.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this. Well, Chris, this was, I mean, I was very selfish in my questions because I'm like, well, I hope the audience likes these questions because this is what I want to ask you. I mean,
Sure.
just really went with what I was genuinely curious about. So I know there's a lot that we could have still covered more of, but I do want to respect your time. And so thank you. Thanks for showing up in the world authentically. Thanks for all your creativity and your humor and putting yourself out there and being of service the way you are of service. And I feel very blessed to have had this time with you. And I look forward to potentially more breath work with
Yeah.
you. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you for, dropping into your authenticity as you listen and what resonates for you. And just ask us questions if you want to reach out. I'm going to have Chris's information in the show notes. It's going to be right there if you want to ask him anything. Is there any specific way that you want them to get in touch with you? Is it Instagram the best thing if they want to ask you something?
Yeah, just DMs on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any kind of like call to action that is exciting for you right now that you want to, hey, check this out?
Uh, I would say just uh, yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. I share a lot of stuff there. I'll be sharing even more. I'll be sharing some trainings coming up, which is
Cool.
exciting, and some, yeah, all kinds of good stuff coming. So just, yeah, and keep
Okay.
breathing.
Hop onto Instagram, keep breathing, keep expanding your capacity to feel good, one breath at a time, guys. Thank you so much, Chris. And I'll see
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Lovely talking to you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.